Hey guys, if everybody who watches this video takes 5 seconds to click on the link in the description below and then hit the thumbs up button on the video that you find there, it will guarantee that I get into round 3 of the next great YouTuber, which is great because it means more publicity, more subscribers, more feedback, and ultimately better content, and you don't have to see me wearing this anymore. It's a win-win for everybody. So thank you guys, you're the real MVPs.
What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. It is Decks and Techs week, and the first deck that I am bringing you guys for this week is the mystery deck that I've been alluding to, which is Evol's. This is an extremely fun deck that I actually think is going to be really good this format, because the Evolzars are really good at taking out things like Shadows and Satellanites, and Satellanites and Shadows also lose out completely to certain floodgate cards that this deck can run, like the mirrors, and it is just a really amazing deck, and I've got some techs that are going to make it even better this format. I enjoy it a lot, and I've been doing really well with it at locals so far. So let's start off with the Evatiles. We've got the Triple Najasho, Triple Westlow. They're fairly self-explanatory. They start off your plays. You need them in your main deck in order to make this deck work, which is why I run Triple Najasho, even though there are a couple of people out there who run only 2. I understand that it's terrible to draw multiples of, but you really want to get those Evatiles into your hand as quickly as possible in your game 1. You can side out Najasho if there's some side deck cards you'd rather have in your deck than the third Najasho. However, it is really important that you have all 3 of the Najasho and all 3 of the Westlow in your deck because of the ratio of Evatiles to Evelsars. The ratio that I have right now of Evatiles to Evelsars is essentially 9 to 7 because I have the 3 diversity as well, which is a really nice ratio to have because it means that I have a lot of Evelsars available, but I'm still more likely to draw an Evatile than an Evelsar, which is something that you really want to have happen. So that's a lineup that I really like. It's a great balance, and that's really the toughest thing to work out with this deck is your ratio of Evatiles to Evelsars. So let's move on to the Evelsars themselves. We've got your 3 Volcano, which is probably the most important Evelsar in the deck because it summons your other Evelsars from your grave when it's summoned by an Evatile, which is awesome, especially late game. It is a 1-card Xyz monster. It sucks to draw. One of 2 matches I've ever lost with this deck. I lost because I drew into 3 of this card, and that sucks, but you have to run 3 because it's so amazing to be able to use. Once again, this ratio helps to make sure that I don't end up clogging my Volcanos or my other Evelsars because I'm more likely to draw an Evatile than I am to draw an Evelsar. So then we have double Diplo and double Serato to complete the 9 to 7 ratio. They're both really good cards in their own ways. Serato is probably the best one to get if you only have access to 1 Evelsar. You'd go for Serato because it allows you to run over your opponent's monsters and get more Evatiles from your deck. And then Diplo is really nice for making your really big plays because you can go like Evaforce with Najasho into double Diplo, pop 2 back row, go for an Xyz monster, which is really good. And that is the entire monster lineup. So there are some cards that I am not running that people usually run in this deck or sometimes run in this deck. The first one is Blaster. I don't see why people run Blaster in this deck. It doesn't do a whole lot for you. Yes, it pops a card. Your deck is full of cards that pop cards. It also sets up your graveyard for Evo Singularity, which I have other things that do that I will talk about in a little bit that are better than Blaster because they are spell speed 2, and I also do not run Lagasucho because it is an absolutely useless minus. Like, people, like, it's a minus for a purpose to some degree, but I'd rather be able to set up my graveyard and get something else than just have a monster that gets run over and then sets up my graveyard. Or, ooh, I can special summon a Westlow from my deck with it and go for a rank 3 play, which really isn't even that great for this deck. So I'm not going to run Lagasucho because I have better cards than Lagasucho for this deck. And let's move on to the spell lineup, which is Triple Duality. Triple Duality is really nice game 1. because once again, you want to ensure that you get those Eva tiles in your hand as quickly as possible. It's just really great when you're going first, so you can set up those Westlows, so that you can get your Eva Singularity plays. However, I do often side out 1 or 2 dualities in Game 2, because generally I'd rather draw a side deck card than a duality. So I tend to side out a Najasho and a duality if I have 2 side deck cards that I want to bring in, etc., etc. So duality is nice, but it is expendable to the side deck. Then you've got your triple Rhoda, your Eva Diversity, and I shouldn't have to explain that. That completes the 9-to-7 ratio. And then you have your Digivolution, your Eva Force, which I shouldn't have to explain. The card is freaking amazing. And then we've got the interesting choice that I'm working with right now, which is Double Enemy Controller. I really like Double Enemy Controller because it has a few different purposes. One, if your opponent has a face-up level 4 monster and you have a Najasho, you basically win, because you can sack that Najasho to take control of their level 4 monster, and then you can summon an Evol from your deck, get its effect off like a Serato, and then you can run over a monster and get pluses, or you can summon a Diplo, pop a back row, and then overlay with your opponent's monster into an Xyz monster. It's also really good for disrupting plays. This is actually a bit of theory that I learned from Simon He during his plays in YCS during the wind-up format. What you would do with agents is he'd summon the third Shine Ball and set an enemy controller, and when his opponent went for Zen Mighty, he would flip the enemy controller, sack the Shine Ball, and take their Zen Mighty, and that actually ends the turn for them. So against something like Madolche, if they summon an Angeli, you can econ sacking your Najasho to take control of their Angeli, and you basically end their turn at that point. You get bonus points if they have a Mufui on the board, because then you can run it over with an Evol next turn, along with the Angeli. Just super fun things that you can do with this card, and it gets around Wiretap, which is super nice. So I run 2 of it because it is a tribute outlet that allows me to make good use out of my used up Westlows and out of Najashos that don't have a force behind them. Where did I put the deck? I put the deck over here. Just a moment. Then we've got our protection cards, our Forbidden Lance, and our MSTs. These just stop us from losing out to back row. I don't like the 3rd MST in the main deck. I generally run a 3rd MST in the side deck, but I really would rather have a 2nd Lance than a 3rd MST, because Lance is really nice for blocking out things like Trap Tricks, Trap Hole, Nightmare, which is a nightmare, if you will excuse the word for Logia. Like if you try to negate your opponent's play and they Nightmare you, that really sucks. So that's why Forbidden Lance is in here. It stops things like that. I've considered running Trap Stun, but I found that Trap Stun hasn't done me a whole lot of good. It's nice to be able to use the Forbidden Lance out of my hand because I don't run a huge number of traps in this deck. And then our final 2 spell cards, we have Soul Charge and Book of Moon. Book of Moon, once again, a defensive back row that gets around Wiretap, which is really nice. And then Soul Charge is really great to get late game, not good to get early game, because you usually only have one Evatile and 1 Evol. You can't really make optimal plays out of this early game, but you can make really great plays out of it. Late game, being able to go for possibly 2 Evolzars, being able to make 2 Xyz monsters is really, really nice. So that is the spell lineup. Speaking of only having 1 Evatile and 1 Evol in your graveyard, the most important card for this deck, for this format, is Eva Singularity. This card is another one of the reasons why I think this deck is going to be really good this format. Because if you're playing against something like Satellanites and they go Altair into Deneb, you can chain to Altair, activating Eva Singularity, put a Soul on the board, take out the Deneb. Then you don't have to worry about your opponent's Delta Theros hitting the board, because they will not put a Delta Theros on the board because they don't have the Xyz material to make it. And then you don't have to go at minus to take out the Delta Theros. You don't have to worry about Tri-Veil hitting the board and wrecking your shit. There are a lot of things that you can stop with Eva Singularity as a spell speed 2 card. It's just freaking amazing. I really shouldn't have had to explain it. Then we've got Double Breakthrough Skill. It's really nice to be able to back up a Logia with this card. I run it instead of Fiendish Chain because you can use it twice, essentially, and it also follows monsters like Angeli to the graveyard, allowing you to make plays during your next turn. It also stops artifacts from stopping you, so really good. I'm only running 2 of it because I don't want to get multiples of it, because it's an inherent minus. And speaking of inherent minuses, Double Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. This is the card that I was talking about that replaces Blaster and Lagasucho for this deck. Spot removal is frickin' amazing this format. If you can block, once again, a certain card that your opponent puts on the board, then you can often block their entire turn. And this allows you to set up your graveyard for a Volcano play or for a Singularity play, the same way that a Lagasucho or a Blaster would, but this can do it in spell speed 2, which is way better, because if your opponent goes like Gear, you can force them to top deck their Geargiano in the next turn. You can block absolutely jack tons of things. It doesn't destroy like a Raigeki break would, so you can get around things like Nephilim. You can take out Shadow monsters, turn them back a turn, which is really nice. Just a lot of things you can do with this card, this format, that makes it really amazing, along with the fact that it sets up your graveyard for Singularity and Volcano. And then you've got your staples, your Bottomless, your Torrential, your Warning, and your Compulse. And that is the main deck. I will switch over to Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro to give you guys a quick rundown of my extra deck, since my actual extra deck is kind of low on cards right now. Let's go.
Alright guys, so here's the extra deck for my Evol deck. We start off with 1 Solda, triple Logia, and double Dolka. I have tried working with double Logia instead of triple Logia, but this card is just so darn good that I find myself wanting to use it a lot more than I thought I would. I often go for it with Singularity, so if I get multiple Singularities, I'm not just going to, go for a Solda and then not use Singularity. I'd like to be able to have access to that third Logia. So having a third Logia is really nice, so that's why I do that Evolzar lineup. Ragna Zero is really good. It beats Madolches sometimes. It can also beat things like Bujins, Fire Fist, etc., so it's a really freaking good card. You've got 2 Arknights because I use this card fairly often and I find myself wanting to have a reserve. So I use 2 of this card. Wind Up Zenmeister is really fun because it allows you to reuse a Westlow once you put it on the board. So what you can do is you can use Westlow to summon and summon an Evolsar, and then you summon another Evolsar, overlay for Zenmeister, detach one of those Evolsars to flip the Westlow back face down, and then you can use the Westlow to either summon a Diplo and pop back row, or you can summon a Volcano and summon that Evolsar from your graveyard to make another Xyz play. So Zenmeister is a lot of fun. I'm not certain if it's absolutely necessary to that, but I just kind of like it. You of course have Exciton Knight. Daigusto Emerald is super good for resetting your plays. You can put Volcanos from your graveyard back into your deck along with an Evatile, and then you have an entire new play reset. And Abyss Dweller is just kind of a staple. Cowboy is fairly staple, since this deck can usually deal a fair amount of damage, but it can very rarely OTK. So I like to have the insurance that I can put through that those extra points of damage. And then finally Rhapsody and Berserk, because I like removing Dragon Rulers from my opponent's grave. So here are just a couple of cards that you might want to try side decking in this deck. I'm not showing you guys a specific side deck because the format is changing, and after Nationals things are going to be fairly different for my side deck. So there you guys go. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And of course, subscribe for more deck discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the RJB0, and I got a jet.